Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for viewing this recording here that we have put together specifically for you. I myself am Daniel Phoenix. I am the Vice Chair of the SNUi Committee. And today, this evening, depending on how and when you are watching, I have my colleague here joining me, Miss Wendy Lyon, a diploma holder, the Spiritualist National Union, and also the Education Coordinator with the SNUi Committee. We're both here with our special guest that we are excited to connect with and also get to know more about and have quite a few questions for this lovely lady. And we hope we are able to have not only provide some entertainment for you and how this all comes about, but also some informative revelations and possibly maybe even having some of your own questions answered over time. So without any more time here, I would like to ask Tracy to come forward and simply allow us to know more about who you are and what is it that you do.
Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me. This is always one of my favorite things to do, be able to tell people who I am, what I do, and it gives everybody a chance to learn more about some of those things. My name is Tracy Murphy. I have been the caretaker and historian for the Fox Sisters property for approximately 23 going on 24 years. It's been a very long time. I am also the director for 5 museums in Palmyra, New York, which is about 5 minutes away from Hydesville. We have 5 museums. One of them is actually connected in some way to the Fox sisters.
Wow, that's quite a lot. So just out of curiosity, how do you balance your work life with your own personal life?
Chaos. It's complete chaos.
I just simply, it seems like your passion is what drives you to be involved in all of these different ventures for yourself.
Absolutely. I work really well under pressure. I'm not a last minute person, but I can be very flexible. I think in a previous life, I was a willow tree because I am very flexible. I can take the wind, I can bend and move and do what I need to do. But yeah, it's just a finely orchestrated, crazy chaos that I have called life.
I'm sure many of us can relate to that. One of the things that is coming forward for me now is that many people have this idea that Hydesville Day is simply a day, and that possibly Miss Tracy Murphy is only busy on Hydesville Day. But can you tell us more about what is it like, or how involved are you when it comes to all aspects of Hydesville Day, Fox Sisters? How does that take up your time throughout the year?
Generally, we do get tours more often spring and summer, fall, not so much in the winter, but the property does get a lot of visitors. Some people like to just come and look into the enclosure that is built around the original foundation from the cottage. Some people want to know more. They want to hear the story about the Fox sisters and their family, where they went after Hydesville. So it can be very busy. I try to schedule accordingly. In the past, I was very accessible, almost too much accessible. Someone would show up at 9 o'clock at night at the property and call and say, hey, I'd like a tour. And I would run down. Of course, I'm literally 2 minutes away from the property, so I would run down. But then after a while, after doing this for so many years, I thought, there's got to be a little give and take. So I usually ask for 24, 48-hour notice. It gets a little more difficult as March approaches because more people want to come, and then we have to plan for Hydesville Day. In the past, Hydesville Day was something that I always did kind of on my own. I really didn't get a lot of help from other sources. So it was just my way of opening the property to the public. And so, I would just set up a nice little tent. I opened the door so people could come in and see the property. We would have cookies and coffee and things to entice people to come. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And now I'm very grateful because the National Spiritualist Association of Churches has taken on a bigger role. And Hydesville Day has really taken on its own identity, which is great.
Yeah, it is. And again, for us, the reason why SNUi has decided to do this pre-recorded is because we know how busy things can get, and we want to honor your time, and we really want to enjoy you at this energy before the energy of Hydesville Day wraps up. And for many of our members, we're very aware of Hydesville Day and what that means to us and to our movement, because it's a part of our own teachings and philosophy of spiritualism for many of our educational courses. And so I actually want to see if Wendy, if you'd care to come forward in this moment. And I know you have a handful of questions that you are interested in asking. And, again, we're here to have a good time, spending time with getting to know Tracy more, as well as being able to get some educational understandings for all of our members who are viewing this. So thank you again, Tracy, and thank you, Wendy.
Yes. Tracy, I was very interested in the fact that you did talks and, people could come, obviously, throughout the year. It did touch my mind. Have you ever considered giving talks to children? For example, maybe groups of school children, because obviously the Fox sisters are young children themselves or young adults. And I wondered if that had ever been something that you had considered or done.
In the past, I have had small groups, mostly Girl Scout troops, Boy Scout troops, or some homeschoolers have come. They did at one time teach a little bit about the Fox sisters in our school system. I don't think that's true anymore. It's something that I would absolutely love to do. I think the whole religion aspect of it kind of keeps it out of the schools. But people who know me and know about the Fox sisters, and we have a really big presence on the internet, on Facebook, and through our other museums, they know that they can contact me, and I'm happy to do tours. But I find the majority of the tours or the talks that I do are mostly 18 to 75-year-olds.
Okay. And can I ask, was it the Fox sisters that drew you to spiritualism when you heard the story, or were you a spiritualist before you became a caretaker or the caretaker?
Yeah, that's always a great question. I grew up going to church. We were raised Lutheran. And when I was about probably 12 or 13, I started to question. I had some questions. And the answer always seemed to be, it's just the way it is. This is the way it is in the Bible. This is the way that it's taught. You just have to have faith. And for me, I needed a little bit more, I think. Blind faith was not something that at 12 or 13 that I necessarily could understand. And I started exploring other avenues. My girlfriend and I, we heard about the Fox sisters. We knew about the property. And so we just started going there. And there was just such a sense of I'm home, which sounds very strange to most people. But for me, it was like coming home. And I felt such a pull and a connection that I had to know more. And to me, it kind of in my heart said, you don't need to rely on blind faith, because you can see the things that go with spiritualism. And it just, as I got older, just kind of made sense, if that makes sense.
Certainly does. And it leads on to my next question. Have you ever experienced phenomena at the premises?
Pretty much on a daily basis when I'm there. The original caretaker, Mr. Drummond, him and his wife are actually buried on the property because it's a spiritualist. There was a spiritualist church that had been on the property that he had formed. So him and his wife are buried on the property. I've never met his wife. I did know Mr. Drummond in life, and I still know him after. He has a very strong presence when things aren't done to his satisfaction. We also hear knocking sounds. That is almost a given. We hear rapping and knocking. We've had fingerprints and little lip prints on the inside of our windows, and brooms are left out, the doorknob shakes. It's, your typical everyday stuff.
I like how you say typical everyday stuff, because for most of us, or actually majority of the population of the world would consider that complete insanity, unless mad. And whereas the spiritualists, we often can relate to these situations or these phenomena. So you're definitely in the ballpark with us. We get you. I just wanted to step in a bit because I'm just curious as to, I'm not sure how often you may be asked this, but in your own personal opinion, what do you feel, or why do you feel it's so important to know about this history?
I think that growing up near Hydesville, it's, to me, Wayne County, which is the county where I live, has always been known as the burned over district. And they call it the burned over district in reference to all of the religions that popped up from the early 1800s into, probably the late 1900s. Spiritualism came along a couple of years after the Mormons made their presence in Palmyra, which is not that far away from us. And a lot of people just know the story as these two little girls who started speaking to a unseen rapping noise, figured out what it was, and then went on to be these brilliant yet sad young women and older women from Hydesville. And I think a lot of it, they think it's just a movement. Oh, when did it become a religion? I thought it was a movement. Why is it called modern spiritualism? I just think it's really important to know that, they were in the right place at the right time. And I think they were the right age where their minds were open. And it's a very important lesson, because as they did get older, they had their own doubts, and they weren't just these untouchable women. They were real life women with real life problems that most of us don't know about because we kind of put them in a box. And the whole part where Maggie makes her confession and says, well, we faked it. We did it because we were told to, and we faked it, and we need money. Most people think, well, that's where the story ends. That's it. But you fast forward to after they're both gone, they have all died. There's very little family left. And what do they find? They find the bones of the peddler where he told them he would be, in the basement of the home in Hydesville. And to me, that right there is absolute. We've done it. We said it. You didn't believe us. Well, here's your proof.
Wow, well said. Thank you. Wendy, thank you for allowing me to step in here. Now you got some more questions there.
I have. Do you think that the spirit communicator especially chose children because they were more open to the possibility of communication?
I do. And I think that historically that most communication starts when we're young, because we have not been influenced by, television or books or other people just yet. With Kate and Maggie, they were pretty isolated in Hydesville. They had only been there for a few months. They had just moved in December, and December, January, February, March, those are harsh winter times. So what are you going to do? You're going to be in the house. You're going to be doing things that your mother and father are asking you. And I think that it was the peddler's chance to kind of vet them and say, these guys are a little bit more interesting than the last guys that were here, and maybe I can break through. Maybe they're going to listen to me this time. And he did, and they did. So to me, get the kids young, and we don't make them think they're crazy. It's just one of those things that it's like, oh, you have an imaginary friend. That's great. Wonderful. We don't need to make it such a big deal, so that as we grow older, we hold on to it, and you fine tune those skills or, the gifts that you have. And I think that's what they did. Kate more than Maggie, I feel. I think Maggie wasn't invested as Kate, but that's my personal opinion.
Yes, because obviously it was momentous, Hydesville Day, to the birth of modern spiritualism as we speak about it. So do you have any original artifacts in the museums that you have belonging to Kate and Maggie?
Most of Kate and Maggie's belongings, and also most of the Fox family belongings, are in a museum, and I believe it's in Illinois. We do have photographs of the clothing they wore. They have their father's spectacles that he wore. There's a christening gown and cap that all of the children wore. Here in Hydesville, what I have, it's rare and it's very special. I have two things. The first thing that I have is the key to the front door. We found that when we were doing some metal detecting in the front of the property, and we actually found the skeleton key that went into the front door. The second thing I have came from a friend of mine who is kind of new to spiritualism, but her great aunt lived on my road here, and which is just one road down from the Fox property. She lived here her whole life, and in 1914, her and her sister rode their bikes to the Fox property because Benjamin Bartlett was taking apart the house, and he was preparing it to be moved to Lilydale. Well, these smart little girls, naughty little girls, took a board from the original cottage and wrapped it up with a note that said, taken on such and such a date from the original house in Hydesville. And they put it away, and it wasn't found until 3 years ago. The young lady, well, she was an older lady now, but she had passed away and her husband passed away. So the house was being sold, and my friend found this piece in the back of a dresser that belonged to her great aunt and was being passed down through the family. She happened to get it, and she called me and she said, I have something that I found and it belongs to you. And so she met me at the property, and we have an original piece from the original cottage that actually burned down in Lilydale from the house. And I can't even tell you how happy that makes me.
That's a pretty rare gift there to have. Pretty amazing. Um, I'm also just curious. I can only imagine there are so many. I hesitate to say myths, but almost misinformation at times that you may have to that you encounter. I'm just curious if there are any off the top of your head that are, if there's like a top 5 list, top 3 list of the common corrections or you may need to make to some misinformation that continues to be circulated.
One of the things that I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to find that is a big issue, but to me it is, Maggie Fox. Maggie's given birth name is Margaretta. And so when a lot of people refer to her, they call her Maggie Fox. Sometimes they call her Margaret. And her name was not Margaret. Margaret was her mother. And I think a lot of people confuse that. And there have been a few websites where I've actually like gone in and said, hey, FYI, Maggie Fox's real name is Margaretta. It was not Margaret. And yet they will dispute it. They're just like, nope, you're wrong. How do you know that? Sometimes for me saying, I just know is not enough for people. And there is some information that I know, and people are always like, well, how do you know? I just know. I just know. That is always like the big thing that always gets me heated is her name was Margaretta, not Margaret. That was her mother. And so I always refer to her as Maggie because it's just easier. It's just easier for people to figure that one out. I think the second one is, people like to make them out as raving alcoholics. And I really think that's misleading. Today we would probably say that they were functioning alcoholics. Big difference. These were young girls who, in a time where women had no rights, women very rarely had a voice, they came through a lot. With women's rights, the Civil War, all of these different religions, always being hounded by someone who didn't believe, they were always ready. They always had to be ready to perform. And it really bothers me when people are like, oh yeah, the Fox sisters, oh, they talked to spirits, but they were drunk all the time. And, they said they lied. Well, then you don't know the story. And unless you're willing to invest a little bit of time into it, that's all you're going to see is, what is on the surface. But once you start digging down deeper, you learn about Maggie Fox and the romance that she had with Elijah Kane, who absolutely adored her, despite the fact that he was 30 years her senior. Would we frown upon that today? Absolutely. That's not the norm. But back then, you were a spinster if you weren't married by 16. So it wasn't, this horrible thing. She loved this man. When he died, her heart was broken. She was probably the very first case of broken heart syndrome. And, when she died from heart failure. She had a broken heart. She never remarried. She couldn't have cared less. Same with Kate. Kate went on to be a mother and a wife, and she had a wonderful life until her husband died. And then, all those thoughts come flooding back. Who am I without my husband? That was the time. And so for her, her solution was to come back to the States and be with her sister. They were more than what we see. And I think that's kind of what really drives me to get the word out about these wonderful children that grew into amazing young women, had lives, and I always say they were real people. Historically speaking, we look at, some people in our history and we put them on these pedestals, but guys, they were real, they were real women with real life problems, same as us. They didn't have the resources that we have now, but it's those little tiny things that bother me. I don't know why. They just didn't have the voice that we can give them now.
I think that's so poignant of what you're pointing out. As I'm listening to you, I'm realizing, as much as I imagine that I do not put anyone up on a platform or a pedestal, that in a way, though, this has been the way that we've been shaped to view the lives of these young women and these women. And I really appreciate how you've broken that down and really reminded us that these were living human beings with heart and soul that struggled with many oppressions and suppressions throughout their lifetime. And at the same time, what an impact that they brought forward for many of us. And as you said in the beginning, they were at the right place at the right time and at the right age for a lot of to occur, to come forward and be brought forward the way that it has been. And again, still, I'm really moved by the fact that I get to be reminded that they were just like us, living and trying to live a life with something so monumental that they were providing and bringing forward, and it stayed with them. This was a big impact, and for many of us, we all can understand that when something huge happens in our life, sometimes depending on how others view it, we either spend a lifetime trying to forget it or make a different name for ourselves, or we try to integrate it into us. And again, you bring forward a lot of that realization that a lifetime of attempting to be in this life, in this physical world. For many of us, it's easy to go to the spiritual world and be very involved in it. And we often can forget just the toll it can take on us in this physical realm. So again, I'm really glad you brought this forward and that's some of your passions, because those are some of the things that, again, it's just like human life here and now. Each of us can judge each other about how each other looks or the words that someone shares about us, but is that the true story? And we have to commit time and dedication to learning more in order to understand more about the story than just simply what's being shared. No, I really appreciate that.
I find it interesting too, in the beginning when they first moved in the house, one of the things that their mother said when they came into the house was, she felt that the house was haunted. This wasn't something that I think the girls picked up overnight, and something touched them on the forehead and said, "Oh, you're going to be a medium now." It definitely was in their family dynamic, and it was all on their mother's side. And I think, once, Margaret Fox had a little bit of a role in all of this as well, because she very well could have held her ground. And, in the beginning, she told the girls, you need to ignore what you're hearing. We need to stop this right now because we're going to be judged by our community and they're going to shun us. And, they went to the local Methodist church. They were Methodists, their religion, that's what they studied. And I think for Mrs. Fox, she was kind of on the edge of, well, I kind of believe this, but my religion tells me otherwise. And so, when the girls kept saying, "Oh, mother, we hear these noises again. Oh, we need to tell you what we're hearing." And she was just like, "No, you need to stop. We're going to ignore these noises and they're going to go away." When in fact, the noises were telling the girls, the voices were telling the girls, we're not going away. You need to give out our messages, and then we'll leave you alone until the next one comes. And so, poor Mrs. Fox, I think she really had to make a choice. What do I do? And, and I think in the end, she chose her family, her children, which was the right thing for her to do.
Yeah, I hear you on that, definitely. Wendy, I know there was a few other questions that you had that you wanted to bring forward as well, so please do.
Certainly. Tracy, you're clearly very passionate about the Fox sisters, and listening to you there and the struggles that they must have had, and yet that spiritual experience clearly defined what was going to be their life journey and what they had to bring to this world. Now, I know that there are many publications regarding the Fox sisters. Have you written something, or would you consider writing, bringing together information about how you feel they changed the destiny of spiritualism?
I have a book, and it's in my head, and it is very slowly going into a journal. My husband bought me these beautiful journals a couple of years ago for Christmas. Everybody says, write a book, write a book, write a book. And it's there, it's in my head. Absolutely in my head. And someday it will come out. I feel like I'm always assisting other people writing their books, which is fine. I don't mind. I just helped an author. She is writing about the Fox sisters, but it's for a young audience, like a Y15, I think they call it, or something like that. But and her and I got along. She was interested in some of the stuff that's going in my book. But mine go much deeper, because learning about the Fox sisters is wonderful. However, I took it one step further and went into the family dynamic. So I know about John Fox. I know what he did after wife and daughters left him in Hydesville. Their son David, I have visited almost all of their graves. So, it's coming. It hopefully someday it's all, and I just sit down and write. I write whatever is in my head. And I think a lot of them, that they give me that information to just get it down. So yeah, it's coming.
Oh, that's excellent. And you said there that you'd visited a number of the graves. Have you ever met any descendants? Are there any left from the Fox sisters or from their family?
I wish there were more. Fortunately, there are not very many left. Mostly because Fox was the only son, and most of his family. There are a few great grandchildren, great nieces, nephews that are out there, but they don't. Well, I don't know if they want to be discovered. When the sisters Maria and Elizabeth, when this whole thing took off, there were 4 siblings that came before the Fox sisters. There was Leah, Maria, Elizabeth, and then David. David stayed in the area. Maria married, and so did Elizabeth, but they didn't necessarily want anybody to know who they were. They took on the shame and embarrassment of, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. This is a curse. It's bad. We don't talk about it. Where David stuck around, and he had his own little. He was a bit of a medium himself, but he just saw it differently. So, and we all know that Leah went on to do her things. She's not my favorite person, so. But it's interesting. The whole family is very interesting. Very interesting. I've actually been in David Fox's house, which is still standing. And a lot of people don't realize, the Fox family moved here from Rochester. They were staying with Leah, and then they moved to Hydesville because they're building a house property. It was about 2 miles up the road from the original cottage. And Mr. Fox stayed. He stayed here. He built his house, and he was hoping that someday his wife and daughters were going to come home, and they didn't. So his house is not standing, but David still is, and it's an amazing vibration when you walk in there.
Wendy, did you have any more that you wanted to get before we come to our wrapping up session?
Yes, it's something I've always been curious about, Tracy. I've never found the answer. Do you know why the Fox sisters called the peddler Mr. Splitfoot?
So research has shown that the girls probably, more than likely, did not say Mr. Splitfoot. The reason why Mr. Splitfoot comes into play because of, I believe, religion. Splitfoot was another name for the devil. They saw the devil as a human form from head to torso, but body of a, so the split foot would be the hooves of a goat. And so there's been a lot of controversy with that, whether or not the girls said, Mr. Do as I do. Everything that I have found, that I've read and researched, including Mrs. Fox's sworn affidavit, says the girls just said, do as I do. There was no Mr. Splitfoot. That's one of the biggest mysteries. That and the name of the peddler raises a lot of, some people say it's not Rosna, it's Rosma, it's Brosma. But we do know for sure that his last name was Rosna, Charles B. Rosna.
We good there, Wendy? Yeah. As we come to a close, I want to respect your time here. I'm just curious, as someone who has such commitment, discipline, dedication into the lives of not only the Fox sisters, but also that of modern spiritualism and understanding Hydesville Day. I'm just curious if we could make like a sound bite, if you could leave us with this, because we often hear this, what is Hydesville Day and who are the Fox sisters? And the answers vary so much. Yes, we get that. We get a lot of answers, but I would love to hear from you as someone who's been in the trenches for so long. If you could, however short you could make it, that would be something that we would often repeat about what is Hydesville Day and who are the Fox sisters. Does that make sense?
Oh boy.
I know that's difficult, but I'm just curious if anyone would have the amount of dedicated time over the years. I would be curious to hear from you. And I know it's a lot to ask of you, but you could break it down about what is Hydesville Day that you would want us to walk away with going, okay, and also who are the Fox sisters?
Wow. No pressure. Thanks. Hydesville Day is a day to celebrate and explore not only two very brave young women, but to look at something that is greater than ourselves. It is more than a day. It's more than a feeling. It's more than a movement. It's a lifestyle. It's a way that everyone regardless of their religion, race, gender, anything. It's a way that we should all view the world, almost through the eyes of an innocent child.
Wow, that's well put. And then again, no pressure, but if you could sum up, and to me it sounds though as though we can't really talk about the Fox sisters without talking about the family dynamics, but to get the full story. But if you could find a way of expressing who the answer or response to who are the Fox sisters that you would hope we would walk away with and carry versus what is often given as the answer. If you had it within your power and you spread it through your own activism and passion, who are the Fox sisters and what would you hope we would understand about them as we walk away from all of this?
To me, the Fox sisters were very brave. They were silent voices in a time where women didn't matter. And they became the voice for many women and men in a time when people needed something. They needed answers to things that they couldn't understand. But through the sisters and their communication, were given some answers. And in the process, were able to figure things out for themselves as well. And I think, moving forward, Hydesville Day should not just be a day. We should think about it every day. I think about it every day because I'm here, I live it, I see it, I drive by, I stop in. So it's always in the back of my mind. When I'm there, I'm connected to the sisters. And I think that's one of the things that always reassures me is that we are all connected somehow. We can all bring it back to nature or kindness or something that should unite us all and not divide us. That's one of the things I've always said is that my next life, I'm going to study more religion because religion should not be dividing us. It should unite us. And I feel that's what the sisters have done for me and people in my community. It's just, I don't know.
I think that's well said for how difficult it is to express in a small breath the impact, the legacy, the trailblazing that they've embarked upon and also created for all of us. And I think that's well said. And I think also it's very well to put that, they are pioneers, but in a way that more than what we may commonly think of. We may commonly think of that they're pioneers of spiritualism because of their communications and their willingness to engage. And at the same time, as you pointed out, there is such a ripple effect that has affected generations and generations that often don't get discussed and often don't get seen as how they were pioneers with those movements, with those inspiration that they actually provided on and on as the years went on. So I think that's a great way of really bringing it all together and full circle as seeing them more than what we're often used to seeing them as, not only as you put the family, the sisters, but also the day. And I think if anything, where I walk away from today is the realization that we often say that, it's not about the destination, it's the journey. And I feel that today you really helped me to realize that even more, that Hydesville Fox sisters are usually a definition that is the end, but it's getting to those understandings, which is really part of the journey and helps us to understand ourselves more and each other. I think was really well said and expressed. So I very much appreciate that. Very much so appreciate that. And your passion and dedication really shows. And I think that's vital, because if I were to, for myself, if I were to leave some kind of, I can't imagine leaving a legacy, but if I were to, I would want someone to really speak my truth and to really defend me when others can't understand me, and be
Right.
willing to stand up tall when others may say, shh, it's not important. So I see that in you and with you. And I thank you for that commitment that you give. Very
Thank
much
you.
so.
Well, emotional now.
And that's great. That's the humanness of us all. And again, you've helped to us to connect to that and reconnect to that. Stories and history are that, but at the same time, it's my hope, as I'm sure it's all of our hope, that in the searching, in the seeking, that we continue to find ourselves and one another. Because there's an answer we're all seeking, and there's an answer that we're all hoping to find. And what if that answer was simply more about ourselves and how to connect deeper with each other? Can you imagine that?
Ugh,
Uh,
I
it would
know.
change.
Can you imagine if they had said, we don't want this. We don't
Right?
want to do this. We don't want to hear this, because, we now know that, we could walk into a room where it's very, very noisy in our heads, and we say, not right now. Nope.
Right.
And they could have very well have said that. They could have said, we don't want this. We don't want to do this. And had, regular, normal lives, but they didn't. And for that, I am grateful. I am so grateful that they were strong enough and knew themselves enough to say, we got this. We can do this. We can handle it.
Yeah.
And they did.
And they have inspired many
Mhm.
in all ways. So again, I do want to thank you, Tracy, for giving us your time and sharing your truthfulness with us and sharing you. It's been great to know also the woman behind the caretaker of the property, because you are actually right there in the forefront that I think maybe sometimes gets missed. And so it's great to be able to see that part of you that you got to share with us. So I appreciate you and bringing this forward, sharing your time with us today. And thank you, Wendy, for being a part of this as well. And thank you to all our members who are willing to listen to this and to really, as we always do, progress what we know, progress ourselves, and progress, my hope, the ways that we continue to seek to connect with one another, and always, because we're all in this journey together. And I hope we find a way to make it kind with each other and towards each other, because at the end of the day, we're all still seekers. And on behalf of Tracy, Wendy, myself, and SNUi, I wish you all a great day, evening, night, whatever it is, wherever you're watching, and many hopes to all see each other again in whatever way that looks. So thank you, everyone, for participating, and we wish everyone the best as you go along your days. Bye, everyone.